Okay, hello and welcome to this recording on consequentialism. So I will talk more about some of the things that we discussed last week. Una sa lahat, ito na naman yung Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Kasi gusto kong balikan yung punto tungkol sa pagkalito na itong mga utilitarian bulag sa katotohanan na may iba't ibang bagay na nagpapaligaya o nagpapasaya sa mga tao. So, pinaliwanag ko na to ng kaunti noong isang linggo. So, the first thing to notice is it's true that there's a subjective component to happiness. And I think this is the part that is at the forefront of most students' minds. So kagaya nung pinaliwanag ko sa halimbawa ko sa klase, kung anong gagawin mo sa Sabado ng hapon, kung meron kang kaunting free time, ikaw ba ay magbabasa, matutulog, kakain, maglalaro ng basketball, etc. Subjective yung sagot in the sense that it depends what you prefer. It depends on the person. But like I said, it's not the end of the story. So while it is true that there is a subjective component to happiness in the sense of what we actually feel in what we're actually going through in our inner life, what happiness feels like to us, and what kind of things we prefer, and about how those things cannot be dictated upon, there is also an objective side to happiness. Okay? So yun yung punto na hindi dapat makalimutan. Ang katotohanan yan, itong tinatawag kong objective o objektibong bahagi ng kaligayahan na nahuhuli dito sa Maslow's hierarchy of needs. The point is really that when we talk about happiness, we're talking about the human condition, or what kind of things people need and want, and what kind of things people need and want are dependent on personal preferences, yes, but it's also dependent on what kind of capacities and potentials every human being has. Right? So the objective side of happiness consists in people being able to live in ways that their physiological needs are met. So ito yung basic needs, food, shelter, clothing. So kailangan ng lahat ng tao yan. Yung sinasabi kong pagkakaroon ng free time o pagkakataon na pumili kung matutulog ka ba, kakain o manonood ng sine, pwede lang yung mangyari kung ang iyong physiological needs ay hindi nasa delikadong kalagayan. Ibig sabihin, nakakain ka, meron kang access sa malinis na tubig na iniinom at nakakatulog ka at hindi parang palagi ka na lang gising at palagi ka na lang nagtatrabaho kasi pag hindi mo ginawa yun, hindi ka makakakain. So, the objective side to happiness consists in being able to produce overall social conditions so that people are able to choose the kind of life that they want to live and also realize their potential. So ito yung sinasabi natin yung ituktok nung Maslow's hierarchy of needs, self-actualization. Ang bawat tao may potential o may kakayahan na marating nila iyan. Pero napakadalas hindi nangyayari. Kasi nga dito pa lang sa ibaba nung pyramid, hindi nakakausad yung tao. Kasi maraming tao, yung physiological needs nila hindi natutugunan o kahit na nakakakain sila, meron silang food, shelter, clothing, wala silang sense of safety. This is both physical and psychological safety. Yung mahalaga yun yung sense, hindi lang na may bahay ka, pero yung may pakiramdam ka psychologically na safe ka doon at magpapatuloy kang ang pagiging ligtas mo doon na hindi sa kahit na anong oras biglang maglalaho ang lahat. Dito sa pag-akyat natin sa pyramid, itong love and belonging, meron ding preferences dito. May mga tinatawag tayong taong introvert, may tinatawag tayong extrovert. Pero pag tao, kinakailangan ng makahulugang ugnayan sa iba pang tao. Kailangan natin yan. That's the level of need. It's a psychological need, yes, but we cannot be happy without meaningful relationships. But apart from meaningful relationships, we also want meaningful work. Itong tinatawag na esteem, na meron kang parang bilib sa sarili mo kasi meron kang narating na kinikilala mo at kinikilala ng ibang tao at meron kang lugar sa lipunan, hindi lang sa malalapit na kaibigan at pamilya. Kasi itong esteem, honor, and recognition na ito, pwedeng maibigay sa iyo ng mga taong hindi naman malapit sa iyo. Kakilala mo sila o kabarangay o kaeskwela, etc. So, when utilitarians say they want to promote the greatest happiness of the greatest number, they don't mean they expect the same things to make people happy. They don't mean they expect people to have the same preferences. They are aware of the same things. So ito na yung principle of charity, ano? They are aware of the same things that you're aware of, that different people have different preferences, and those preferences are shaped by a lot of things, some of which are in the person's control, others are not. So, totoo lahat yon. Pero, yun nga sinasabi ni Mel, kung wala tayong mga polisiya sa lipunan na pinipigil yung may kapangyarihan na sila lang yung kapakanan lamang nila ang pangangalagaan, ang mangyayari, napakaraming tao, hindi nila maatim itong karamihan. Baka kahit nga yung unang palapag dito sa Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So kailangan ng lahat ng tao yan, and the vision of a utilitarian is to create a society in which nobody gets left behind, in which everyone is able to attain some level of self-actualization. Pumapayag sila, kagaya nung nasabi ko sa Module 3, pumapayag sila na bawasan ng kaunti yung mga makukuha ng iba, pero ang babawasan natin yung nakarating na sa mas maraming nivel nitong nakikita natin dito sa slide ngayon. Kasi yun nga, yung sinasabi na kapag sumasobra na hindi mo kailangan para mabuhay yung meron ka, tapos may mga tao sa paligid mo na halos mamatay na sila kasi hindi nila nakukuha yung kailangan nila, sa kanila na dapat yon. So actually the insight is a reality of the human condition also, that we create more happiness, more pleasure when we give the small amount that's a matter of luxury to one person. So hindi niya kailangan yun para mabuhay, hindi niya nga yun kailangan para sa esteem at self-actualization. Sobra yun para sa kanya. Babawasan mo siya, tapos ililipat mo dun sa tao na kahit na itong physiological needs niya nagkukulang. What that does is that it helps the person in need, that particular person, but also the total system has a greater increase in total happiness or pleasure. Kasi malaki yung jump doon from having little to nothing to having enough. That creates a lot of improvement. So yun yung insight about what benefits needy individuals in particular and all of society in general when we have this approach to distribution. So mas marami pang siyentipikong paraan para sukatin itong happiness. So ito yung particular na and non-developed country, non-Western, dito sa Asia, itong Bhutan, meron silang tinatawag na gross national happiness. So sagot ito din dito sa pagtutol na ito. So some people raise an objection against utilitarianism because they claim that happiness cannot be measured or that happiness is vague. Marami na tayong dinaan ng talakayan kasama na doon sa mga sinabi ko sa nakaraang slide na pinapakita na hindi naman ganon kalabo at saka hindi naman ganon kaimposible. Marami tayong pwedeng gawing proxy para sukatin kung mga tao ba sa lipunan, sila ba ay masaya, hindi mababaw na saya lang, pero yung malalim na parang kaligayahan na nararapat sa tao, yung nabubuhay po sila ng buhay tao na nararating nila yung kanilang potensyal. So yun yung interest na actually yun ang interest hindi lang ng utilitarian yun ang interest ng napakaraming tao. A lot of people in the social sciences, so I've mentioned this before, psychologists, economists, and other researchers and other social scientists have been defining and measuring happiness already. Itong pagtutol sa purely capitalistic or GDP wealth GNP-based measure of progress. Ito yung pinipintasan nito dahil napakaraming tao, binibilang lang yung yaman, yung yaman ng bansa, yaman ng mga individual, at saka pero hindi tinitignan yung kabutihan talaga ng bawat tao at ang kabutihan ng kabubuan ng lipunan. Kaya itong gross national happiness ng Bhutan, this is a very, some people call it idealistic. I suppose there's an element of idealism in it, but it's also very practical. Because the GNH index includes both traditional areas of socio-economic concern. So tinitignan na nila yung standard of living, tinitignan nila yung access to health and education, pero tinitignan nila yung less traditional aspects, so katulad ng culture and psychological well-being, sorry. So the GNH is a holistic reflection of the general well-being of the Bhutanese population rather than a subjective psychological ranking of happiness alone. So it's again, I will say that statement about the GNH, it is a holistic reflection of the general well-being of the Bhutanese population rather than a subjective psychological ranking of happiness alone. So hindi sila nagsisurvey na kagaya nung nakita natin na tinatanong yung mga tao, masaya po ba kayo? Hindi ganon. So imbes na ganon, tinitignan nila rin yung karaniwang tinitignan ng mga nag-aaral ng economics, katulad ng standard of living, access to health. So mabilis na makita yung access to health, di ba? Pwede kang kumuha ng ratio ng population to number of doctors, population to number of nurses, kung ilan yung ospital, kung magkano magagastos ng taong magpapagamot. Pwede mo rin yan sukatin sa edukasyon, kung gaano karami yung eskwelahan, kung yung ratio ng student to teacher, yung ratio ng estudyante sa library, bilang ng mga libro sa library, etc. Sa makatuwid, pwede nating sukatin kung nagagawa ba ng tao yung mga bagay na gugustuhin niya. Meron ba siyang pagkakataon na gawin yon? So this is how the construction of the GNH is demonstrated. So when people say happiness cannot be measured, the quick answer is, look, Bhutan is trying to do it very systematically and scientifically, non-dogmatically, because they are open to criticism and further revision of what they have. But here's one way that happiness is actually measured. So the GNH index includes 9 domains. So it includes psychological well-being, health, education, time use. So tinitingnan nila saan ginugugol ng mga tao yung oras na meron sila, nagising sila. Halimbawa, tanggalin na natin yung natutulog sila, tanggalin na natin yung nagtatrabaho sila, yung free time nila saan nila ginagamit. And tsaka sinusukat din yung cultural diversity and resilience kasi mahalaga para sa Bhutan, mga tao sa Bhutan at ang kanilang mga leader, yung pagpapahalaga dun sa kultura sa kaparaan ng pamumuhay nila. So they also look into good governance, community vitality, ecological diversity and resilience, living standards. So the GNH index is decomposable by any demographic characteristic. So pwede mo rin tignan, meron bang discrepancy na pag tignan mo yung access ng mga lalaki sa psychological well-being, health, education, time use, iba yung resulta kumpara sa mga babae, o baka naman hindi gender, baka naman geographic location, baka pag tinignan natin yung mga taga-Bhutan na nandun sila sa lungsod, maganda yung mga numero ng kanilang access sa healthcare, education, etc. Pero yung mga nandun sa liblib na lugar, hindi. So pagka meron ka kasing datos na kagaya noon, pwede kang magdesisyon kung anong susunod na gagawin muli para walang mapag-iwanan, so that everybody's happiness matters and everybody's happiness matters equally. So the measurement is directed towards a forward-looking approach to policy and decision-making. So all this by way of saying that research like this can be used to inform policy design and even ethical decision-making. I've been saying before, and I want to emphasize again now, that utilitarians are empiricists. They are interested in data like this and frameworks for data gathering. So ganito yung interest ng utilitarian. Ganito yung gusto nilang batayan ng mga desisyon natin tungkol sa tama at mali. Maaring hindi kayo sigurado kung sumasang-ayon kayo sa sinasabi nila, pero mahalaga na maintindihan kung saan sila nanggagaling at saka paano sila mag-isip at saka kung ano yung gusto nila mangyari. So nakikita na natin. Sa palagay ko nga baka mas maganda pa yung alignment nitong gross national happiness ng Bhutan sa GHP. The GNH is most likely better aligned with the GHP than the welfare state. Kasi hindi ko na ulitin yung mga nandun sa Aeon article at saka yung pinaliwanag sa module, pero kasi karamihan ng welfare state na nabuo yan batay sa sosyalismo, hindi batay sa utilitarianism. Okay. So I will move on to a different topic. I hope that the discussion in this recording addresses any remaining concerns about the supposed subjectivity of happiness and how it's a serious objection to utilitarianism. Okay. So, gusto kong talakayan ngayon yung pagsasagot sa midterm exam. Okay. So, ito yung unang listahan ng tips para sa midterm exam. Dapat sana kasi ngayon naghahanda na tayo para sa midterm exam. Itong design ng Module 5 actually, the module immediately preceding the midterm week. It is actually, I actually made it so that it's helping you to get ready, but of course that presupposes that you've been keeping up with the lesson. So I hope you have been doing that. So pagdating ng midterm, wag kalimutan, ang midterm ay may dalawang bahagi. Kailangan pumasok at magdala ng yellow pad, blue or black pen, at notes. Kailangan naka-print out yung notes. Bawal gumamit ng device. So kung tinatype nyo yung notes nyo sa computer nyo, kailangan i-consolidate at i-print iyon. At bawal mag-share ng notes sa midterm exam. Yung unang bahagi ng midterm exam gaganapin sa Miyerkules, March 29. Yung unang bahagi ng midterm exam nakatuon sa pagpapaliwanag ng theory. So, on March 29, you are expected to write an essay in which you explain the theory. More specifically, you explain rule utilitarianism. So, rule utilitarianism, yung ipapaliwanag at ipapaliwanag nyo, yun din yung i-apply sa case. Okay. So, sa bawat pagkakataon, so part 1 of the midterms will be on March 29 and part 2 will be on March 31. Sa bawat pagkakataon, sa bawat bahagi ng midterm, merong instructions. Merong instructions. Uulitin ko, merong instructions at kailangang basahin yun ng mabuti. Bibigyan ko kayo ngayon ng sample kung ano itsura nung pwedeng maging tanong sa pagpapaliwanag ng theory. Hindi ko kayo bibigyan ng theory na explain rule utilitarianism. Hindi magiging ganun kasimple. May mga detalye at may mga steps kasi makakatulong yon sa pagbibigay ng puntos noong mga sagot nyo. Okay. So, kailangan basahing mabuti yung tanong o kung ano yung pinagagawa. At napakahalaga na sundin iyon kasi iyon ang paraan ng pagkakaroon nyo ng puntos. Pag may ginawa kayong iba, kung halimbawa, the task is to explain rule utilitarianism and what you do is you explain act utilitarianism, you will earn little to no points kasi hindi naman yun ang pinagagawa. Okay? So, tandaan niyon. So, read the question and instructions carefully, make sure to do the task, and kagaya ng sinabi ko noong nakaraang linggo, huwag magpaligoy-ligoy, go straight to the point, and the main point or the conclusion of your essay should be in the first few lines. May nagtanong sa akin pagkatapos nung session nung Biyernes, "Ma'am, bawal ba mag-introduction? Bakit gusto mo walang paligoy-ligoy, straight to the point?" Ang mabilis na sagot dyan, pwedeng magka-introduction, pero hindi dapat mahaba. Hindi dapat mahaba, hindi naman kayo nagsusulat ng libro. Pag may isang libro na 200 pages, yung introduction ay 20 pages. 200 pages yun eh. Yung sinusulat yun naman, 2 pahina lang ng yellow pad maximum. So, ang introduction nyo dapat mga 3 pangungusap lang. So, yung sinasabi kong paligoy-ligoy, minsan nangyayari yun kasi hindi proportionate yung haba ng introduction. Kaya nga ang payo ko, go straight to the point. And if you must have an introduction, 2 to 3 sentences should be enough. Okay. So, kailangan rin mag-brainstorm tungkol doon sa isusulat at wag ubusin yung oras sa pagsusulat lamang kasi pag nangyari yon, una, pag walang brainstorming or planning about the structure of the short essay, sabog yon. Sabog. Walang structure, parang kung ano lang yung maisip na sunod yun ang isusulat. That does not make for a very clear explanation when there is no clear structure or there is no discernible flow of the discussion. So, kailangan mag-brainstorm. At saka itong sunod, kailangan, siyempre, yung pinaka mahaba dito, yung pagsusulat. Yung mismong, yung ballpen, nakadikit sa papel, tapos tuloy-tuloy, bumubuo kayo ng mga salita, mga pangungusap, ganon. So, kailangan nyo mag-practice. So, ngayon, ang tanong ko, nakapagsimula na ba kayo mag-practice? Kung hindi pa, may oras pa naman. Kasi ito yung isang konkretong tanong. Gaano kahaba ang kaya mong isulat sa loob ng 30 minuto? Hindi tumitigil. Yung may plano na kung anong sasabihin. Malinaw na kung ano sana yung tanong. 30 minutes, kaya mo bang pumuno ng 1.5 yellow pad? Na hindi tumitigil ng pagsusulat, hindi parang stop and go, yung tuloy-tuloy lang. Okay. So, kailangan yun i-practice kasi minsan nawawala rin sa tansya yung pagtatakal ng oras dahil nga hindi nag-practice. Okay. So, wag kalimutan, kailangan mag-practice. Bibigyan ko na kayo ng sample question na pwede nyong pag-practicean. Huli, you need to allow for time to review or edit. Editing is different when it's a handwritten essay compared to editing when you are using device with a keyboard, kung meron kayong sa Google Docs o kaya sa Microsoft Word, tapos may keyboard kayo. Siyempre, iba yung editing kasi mas madaling magbura at saka mag-replace. Pagka naman sa handwritten, mas limitado yung pwede nyong gawing editing. Pero pwede pa rin. Lalo na dapat maiwasan sa edit yung may mga salita pala na kulang. Meron palang mga pangungusap doon na hindi natapos o kaya minsan may mga missing na not. Iba pala yung ibig sabihin ng pangungusap tapos nakalimutan yung salitang not. Kaya parang completely opposite yung nasabi. So, kailangan din maglaan ng oras para doon sa midterm. So, bibigay ko na sa inyo yung sample question itong susunod na slide. So, like I said, the first part of the midterm requires you to explain the theory, more specifically to explain rule utilitarianism in your own words. So, dun muna tayo sa explanation. You're asked to explain the theory. Yung instructions nyo doon sa unang bahagi ng midterm, sa March 29, magiging yung tsura niyan. Kagaya nitong nasa pink font. So, discuss the difference between how rule utilitarians assess two ordinary moral rules. The one that says killing an innocent person is forbidden, and the other which implies that charitable giving is optional. Okay. So, ordinary moral rules itong dalawa. Okay. Una, bawal pumatay. Pangalawa, mabuting mag-donate sa charitable organization, pero optional iyon. So, yun yung 2 rules of common sense morality. So, let's imagine this is the question that I give you. on March 29. So, you have 60 to 70 minutes to finish everything. So, yung 60 to 70 minutes, 80 minutes yung buong period eh. Pero sabihin na natin na 10 minutes mauubos sa pagbabasa nito at saka pagsusulat ng pangalan at saka pakikinig dun sa iba pang verbal instructions na ibibigay ko. So, yung 60 to 70 minutes na yun, kayo magtatakal kung paano nyo babasagin yun. 30 minutes for what, 10 minutes for what, etc. So bahala na kayo doon. Dapat may strategy din at saka napag-isipan din kung paano yun gagawin. So how will you accomplish this task? Right? So una, kagaya ng sinabi ko nung sa nakaraang slide, you need to brainstorm. How are you going to accomplish this task? Una sa lahat, there are two rules of two ordinary moral rules or two rules from folk morality. Ito yung karaniwang pag-iisip. Una, dapat malinaw sa isusulat mo kung ano yung hatol ng RU dito. So what do rule utilitarians say about the rule that says killing an innocent person is forbidden? Do rule utilitarians accept this moral rule? The quick answer is yes, they do. Yes, they do. So they take this rule on board and they adopt it as part of the utilitarian moral code. Okay. So dapat, first point, dapat accurate yung sinabi mo na tatanggapin nila yan. Tapos, ilalatag mo kung bakit. Ilalatag mo kung bakit na ginagamit ang mga pangungusap at salita na ikaw yung nagsulat. Kasi yung pagpapaliwanag sa iyo yun eh. So, open notes, hindi pwede na kinokopya mo lang kung ano yung nakasulat sa module. Pag ginawa mo yun, hindi ko yung nagpapaliwanag, kaya hindi rin maraming masyadong puntos yung pwedeng ibigay sa'yo. Kasi kinopya mo lang yung nakasulat sa module. So, muli, kailangan ipaliwanag sa sariling pamamaraan yung tamang sagot. May tamang sagot dito eh. How will rule utilitarians assess? So, the quick answer is, for the first rule, they will accept it. For the second rule, that says charitable giving is optional, how would rule utilitarians assess this rule? The quick answer is they will reject it and modify it. Right? So dun pa lang, no, pagka mali yung sagot mo dun sa pagka mali yung sagot mo dun, edi syempre malaki na yung deduction. So pangalawa, dapat tama yung sagot mo na ayon sa kanila, hindi ito katanggap-tanggap at dapat baguhin. Ilalatag mo na naman kung bakit, kung ano yung mga kadahilanan na binigay nila. Tapos, huwag kalimutan, meron dito nakalagay sa instruction, discuss the difference. So, ibig sabihin, dapat accurate yung assessment sa Rule 1, accurate assessment sa Rule 2, tapos may pagtalakay ng pagkakaiba. Bakit may mga ordinary moral rules na tinatanggap nila, kagaya dito, at saka merong hindi? So, kailangan rin ipaliwanag yon. So, kahit na parang napakasimple o napakadali ng tanong, kailangan may paghihimay at saka may strategy kung paano sasagutin at saka tutugunan kung ano yung pinagagawa. Okay. So, sana nakalinaw iyong sinabi ko dito at kagaya nga nung pwede nyo nang gawin ngayon, pwede nyo pag-practicean ito. Tignan nyo kung although binigay ko rin yung sagot at saka binigay ko yung mga kung paano pwede magkamali, pero subukan nyo pa rin isulat. Tignan nyo kung gaano kahaba yung kaya nyo isulat sa loob ng 30 to 40 minutes. Okay. So, ngayon, pagkatapos nung unang bahagi ng midterm na ipapaliwanag niyo yung theory, kailangan naman siyang i-apply. So, the second part of the midterm requires that you apply the theory to a case. For the application, you need this. How do rule utilitarians make a decision? Right? So, unang bahagi ng midterm, ipapakita mo na kaya mong ipaliwanag, ginagamit ang sarili mong mga pangungusap kung tungkol saan yung theory. Pangalawa, kailangan mo naman siyang i-apply. So, how do rule utilitarians make a decision? Quick answer, they try to figure out if a specific rule or a specific proposed rule should be included in the utilitarian moral code. So that depends on a comparison on what will produce maximum net welfare. So meron kang candidate rule number 1, candidate rule number 2. So meron kang candidate rule number 1, halimbawa, charitable giving is optional. Ayun, candidate rule number 1. Candidate rule number 2, charitable giving is morally obligatory. And then they will try to compare what net welfare will be produced if there's a society that follows rule number 1 and a society that follows rule number 2. In doing that comparison, they will use ordinary common sense, and they will also use available information from the natural and social sciences. So facts about the human condition, facts about societies in general or particular communities in making an informed prediction on outcomes. Right? So mahalaga sabihin ng malinaw kung ano yung rule number 1 at saka rule number 2. So palagi may dalawa o mahigit pa sa dalawang option. Tapos ipunin yung mga information. So this is raw material for decision making. What are the things, what are the points that will be relevant for predicting which rule would produce the best consequences? Pwede dito mag-internet search ng konti, pero baka hindi lang baka, malamang mas matino kung upo ka, mag-iisip ka at batay sa alam mo tungkol sa mundo, tungkol sa sarili mo, tungkol sa ibang tao, at tungkol sa anong pwedeng mangyari. So gamitin yung reasoning skills, yung kakayahang mga tuwiran, at magmula doon bumuo ng conclusion. So, and then you may identify unique factors that are relevant for implementing the proposed rule. So ano yung expectation yan? So if we start implementing the rule that charitable giving is obligatory, how do we implement that? The answer of the utilitarians is we try to talk about it and we convince people that this is the better way to think. So ganyan yung ginagamit ni Peter Singer at iba pang utilitarian na technique. So they go around and they start talking about the shallow pond example, and then they keep talking about helping feeding programs and other similar causes that require not a lot of money from donors but have a massively good effect on the suffering. Ano ang hindi ginagawa ng mga utilitarian? Hindi sila nag-iikot at naninisi ng mga tao na sinasabi, ikaw, ba't di ka nag-donate? Hindi lang ginagawa yun. Bakit? Kasi it doesn't produce good outcome. It doesn't make people donate. How likely is it that the person who gets blamed and shamed for not making a donation yesterday or this morning, how likely is it that they're going to donate? Very unlikely. Baka magalit lang sila, etc. So wag gawin iyon. That's the idea. Remember that the interest is in producing the best outcome. So as I say in the module for this week, right is not equal to praiseworthy, wrong is not equal to blameworthy. Meaning, okay, mali, nandun na tayo, mali, hindi sang-ayon dun sa ideal rule yung ginawa nila na hindi sila nag-donate. Pero sisisihin mo ba sila? Ang tanong, depende. Kung sisisihin mo sila, makakapagdulot ba yun ng magandang resulta? Kung hindi, wag mo silang sisihin. Iba yung gawin mo. Imbes na sisihin sila, pwedeng engganyohin sila na mag-donate, na convincein sila na yun ang pwedeng gawin na susunod. Okay. So, and then you can calculate or reckon which proposed rule would produce the GHP, and then you can have a conclusion and discuss your conclusion in a way that will persuade others to agree with you. Okay? So, ganon yung pagsusulat ng essay doon sa pangalawang bahagi ng midterms. Ito yung magiging tanong sa, or magiging task sa March 31. So to discuss your rule utilitarian conclusion about a case in a way that persuades others to agree with you. So yun yung target, or yun yung aim. Okay. Ngayon, tungkol saan yung case? Simulan ko ng pag-usapan. Kasi alam ko yung iba sa inyo medyo nag-aalala, parang completely surprised ba? Hindi ko malalaman bago mag midterms week kung ano yung case. Malalaman mo kung tungkol saan simula sa recording na ito, pero yung particular na version ng tanong, makikita mo lang sa mismong araw. So, pwede ka mag-research ng konti. Okay, so tungkol saan yung magiging case sa midterms? Ang sagot ito, online behavior. Online behavior. Meron bang mga tungkulin tayo na gawin, di dapat gawin dito sa mga ginagawa natin pag tayo ay online, right? So I have this picture from Rappler about an article that came out in 2021. So it's more than 2 years old. But it tells us something that has remained constant for the last few years, which is that our country remains top in social media and internet usage. So very high rates of social media and internet usage in the Philippines. We also know that there's a lot of misinformation and disinformation. So maraming mga kamalian na kumakalat sa YouTube lalo na, sa Facebook at iba pang social media platforms. Alam din natin na malaki yung polarization. Ibig sabihin ng polarization yung parang may mga kampo, may mga grupo na ganito sila mag-isip, na ibang-iba doon sa isa kabilang grupo. At yung dalawang grupong yan parang hindi nag-uusap, hindi lang sa hindi sila pareho ng mag-isip, hindi sila nag-uusap ng matino. Baka nagbabardagulan sila sa Twitter, pero hindi sila nag-uusap ng matino. Okay? So, roughly, that's what polarization means. Right? Is there a duty to remain on Facebook? Is it a matter of ethical obligation to remain on Facebook? Where's this question coming from? I'm sending you a link to an article where Maria Reza of Rappler says, we should not, okay, so parang moral imperative, we should not leave Facebook. Kasi ang sabi niya, alam ko napakaraming problema sa Facebook. Pero what if people who value facts leave Facebook, what would that do to people who remain? So that's her question. And the implication is that it will damage people who remain. So if you value facts and you know that there are people on Facebook that do not value facts in the same way that you do, then you must remain. And because the outcomes are bad if you do differently. That's the implication. So sa tingin ko, maganda itong pag-isipan gamit ang rule utilitarianism. Right? So, eto na naman yung isa pang tanong, are we obliged to behave in certain ways on social media? Meron ba tayong dapat gawin, hindi dapat gawin? Bukod sa, okay, don't leave Facebook, don't delete your Facebook account, right? For instance, should we avoid cursing, saying bad words about people or views that we think are objectionable? Ang social media ay napakadalas gamitin para mag-vent. May mga tao na and the platforms encourage that because it's a form of engagement that that makes people stay on the sites longer. So venting, I mean, because when people get triggered, with their strong emotional responses, especially anger, anger can very quickly morph into hate. And what we get are posts where there seems to be a basis on fact. Bawa, totoo namang walang Taliano Gold. Okay, pero tama ba na kung may mga taong naniniwala doon, meron kang sasabihing masama tungkol sa kanila? So, doon ang gagaling yung pangalawang tanong. Are you obliged to behave in certain ways or social media? Or may tungkulin na wag ganon, wag gumawa ng ganon. Bakit? Yun ang mas interesanting tanong. May isang dahilan na baka hindi naiisip ng mga estudyante katulad ninyo dito. But there's a self-interested, not necessarily an ethical reason to be careful about what you post online. And it is that most companies today screen job applicants by looking at their social media posts. Matagal na itong ginagawa ng mga kumpanya. Hindi naman sila parang naghahanap ng baho ng mga aplikante. Pero tinitingnan nila kung anong klaseng tao yung nag-a-apply ng trabaho sa kumpanya nila, etc. So merong reason, merong dahilan batay sa self-interest na mag-ingat. Pero ibig sabihin na nun, hindi mo kukontrahen yung mga pananaw na dapat kontrahen. So yun yung tanong. Tapos kung kukontrahin mo man yung mga pananaw na dapat kontrahen, kahit paanong pagkontra, okay lang? O meron bang mga paraan na dapat yun ang ginagamit? At may mga paraan na hindi dapat ginagamit. So yun yung mga tanong natin. May mga tanong na parang ganito ang lalabas doon sa part 2 ng midterms. Meron pa ang dalawang ibang tanong dito that I will discuss a bit more. So the third question is, can we be blamed if we don't educate ourselves on how algorithms work? Hindi naman kailangan maging computer science person at matutong mag-code o makita kung ano yung itsura ng mga algorithms sila. Una sa lahat dahil sikreto naman at non-democratized yung mga algorithms na yan. Pero maraming mga pagtalakay sa, there are many well-informed and interesting articles online that discuss how algorithms work. Is there a moral obligation to educate oneself about that? Na dapat nalalaman ko na mas pinapanigan ng Facebook, ipakita sa akin yung mga bagay na nakakagalit sa akin. Kailangan din may tungkulin ka bang alamin kung ano yung pagsasaliksik ng mga social scientists, lalo na yung sociologist at psychologist tungkol sa dynamics of polarization. Halimbawa, pagka ang usapan ay tungkol lang sa paninisi, mas lalong nawawala yung pagkakataon ng matinong talakayan. Yung parang kayo kasi, hindi kayo nag-isip, hindi kayo nagbasa, kaya ganyan binoto nyo, kaya tignan mo kung sino yung nanalo. So, pagka ganun yung timpla ng mga sinasabi, ano yung nangyayari sa dynamics ng usapan at saka ano yung epekto nun sa polarization na nakakasama sa ating lahat. So, meron ba tayong tungkulin na alamin yung mga yan? O kung sabihin natin, kasi hindi ko binasa wala akong oras, dami kong ginagawa. Dami kong tungkulin sa pamilya, may part-time work pa ako, ang dami pinagagawa sa akin ng professor ko sa UP, so hindi ko binasa yun Tapos hindi ko na, basta ginamit ko na lang yung Facebook. Okay lang ba yun? O may hindi ka nais-nais na nangyayari? Okay. And finally, do we apply the same rules or standards? Do we apply the same rules, standards, expectations to others compared to ourselves? Kasi kagaya nung nasabi ko, kung sinisisi yung mga naniniwala sa Taliano Gold, malamang yung naniniwala sa Taliano Gold, di rin nakakaunawa ng algorithm. Kung sisisihin mo sila para doon, parang hindi patas na walang tungkulin sa panig mo na alamin din yung pwede at dapat mong malaman. So, ayan yung mga topic at uri ng mga tanong na lalabas sa midterm sa March 31. Hindi eksakto at hindi lahat itong mga tanong na to, pero mga katulad niyan. Okay. So kung may mga tanong kayo o concern tungkol dito sa kasong ito, pag-uusapan natin sa klase sa Biyernes, March 24. Okay. So ngayon, maganda na ring isipin yung overlap ng parts 1 and part 2 ng rule utilitarianism. Yung parts 1 and part 2 ng midterm. Kasi yung unang bahagi, pagpapaliwanag ng theory. So in the first part, you explain the theory. In the second part, you apply the theory. So what satisfies both parts? This is the thing. And this is the thing that you should start brainstorming and practice writing on also. What are the parts of the theory? What are the parts of rule utilitarianism that are especially relevant for discussing rules on online behavior? Okay? So, mahalaga ba dyan yung objection from expediency? Mahalaga ba dyan yung act utilitarian Frenchman example? Mahalaga ba dyan yung precedent effect? Okay? Kung mahalaga yung precedent effect, bakit? Paano? Okay? Tapos, okay, ipapaliwanag ko yung precedent effect. Anong strategy gagawin ko? Makapagbibigay ba ako ng sarili kong halimbawa, etc. Okay. So, ito yung mga pwede na at actually dapat pag-isipan na may kinalaman sa midterm exam. Sana nakatulong itong recording. And of course, like I said, if you have questions, you can ask them during the session on Friday. And during that session, we will continue to have graded recitation. Okay, that's it for this recording.